Good evening, the folks from China DevOpsDays community. Today we have two very special guests from the Agile and DevOps world. Let's welcome Patrick Du Bois, one of the most influential person in DevOps community, the founder of Global DevOpsDays movement. And let's also welcome Arie van Bennekom, the co-author of Agile Manifesto, chief examiner of Agile program. I am Sun Zhenpeng, the co-organizer of China DevOpsDays. It is my great privilege to host the interview with these two industry thought leaders. Both of them have visited China DevOpsDays event in past years. This year, due to COVID-19 pandemic, international travel become extremely challenging. Tonight, we are very grateful to have their support remotely. I would like to start with Patrick to share some of his experience at China DevOpsDays kickoff event back to Beijing 2017. Hi Patrick, at your first China visit was very short. We have promised each other to have you back again. Would you please share of your first impressions of China and our China DevOpsDays event?
Well, thank you, Sun. And I want to give you a big shout out and thank you for hosting and kind of making this happen. It's too bad I can't make it in person. Like you say, I'd rather come back in person whenever I can. I think when I landed, my first impression of China was you, right? So you were very nice to me and friendly. And I think I was probably many foreigners impressed by the bigness or the scale when you land into one of the cities. Also that I'm not capable of speaking the language, even though I speak a lot of languages. But when I reached the conference and talked to many people at the conference, it struck me how much effort they went through. They had a translator, especially for me. They led me to the stage. I experienced for the first time a bodyguard, which was new to me. But I think it's like the energy and the feel that everybody was interested to learn about the new things and how things have been progressing. And it was a very big surprise to be on stage, being in that big room where everybody was watching with full energy and engaging. I felt I couldn't engage that much because of the language, but I felt the warmth of the whole crowd coming at me on that magical moment when I did my keynote over there. So
great. All right. And Arie, I think you've been to China several times, but last year, December, also in Shanghai. I think that was your first DevOpsDays experience in China, in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Can you please also share your experience with your trip in China and Shanghai last year?
Yeah, well, that was my first time in Shanghai, by the way. And I've been to Tianjin and Beijing. And if you take it a little bit further into the past, coming to China, I have to share with Patrick is you lack the language skill. I don't speak any Chinese, right? So I have to say it's almost on the level of arrogant because you used to go somewhere and people speak at least English or German or French, and I can somehow manage always. But then I see the openness of the people, right? When they are really the curious and they want to know, and you talk before or after master classes, etc., and they come, and where the language might be different and the food is not always what I am used to, but I love it, by the way. You can see when Patrick talks about the energy, the similarities where people want to know and the curiosity that people have. I love that so much, and it's amazing. And I love that also being in Shanghai at the DevOpsDays, which is of course one of the bigger conferences you have, but also when I do smaller sessions in like Tianjin or in Beijing, I like that kind of energy. And as you know, last year in Shanghai, we had a really good time. It was really a great moment. And I thank you for that because you got me there. We work sort of, for the same employer. Maybe nobody knows, but we work sort of for the same employer a little bit. I'm sort of involved in Exin as well a little bit. So we got to know each other via that one, but it's a joy working in China. I love it.
Right. Thanks, Arie. Also, Patrick, you want to
yeah,
say
maybe
something?
one thing that I want to add is that like when I saw everybody on stage and I saw like the presentations later and some of them were in English, I realized that doing this event is important because it like brings another pool of stories, you know, from the ones that we've used to, like other companies, and I think that was really nice how it started as a connection between the different countries and exchanging kind of like knowledge and partnership. So that kind of breaking the silos, you did that as well across the kind of the continents, and that was really nice as a takeaway for me, that there's so many talent across the world that has different stories, different problems that we should listen to. So.
Right. Once again, thanks for both of you supporting our DevOps Days event. And Patrick, especially you, I remember your trip was so, it's so special. And we made, you came over within 48 hours and you don't even have a visa with a 72 hours transition visa, but you managed to save the events actually. So a lot of people have been there and still remember that. All right. I think also since Agile Manifesto has been released back 2001, and DevOps has been released 11 years ago, since 2009 in Ghent. And finally, with the opportunity of DevOps Days, our Chinese folks, our Chinese community finally had the opportunity to see both of you on stage in person. And if there's no COVID this year, most likely they will have opportunity to see you again in Shanghai. My next question is regarding the involvement of the two practices, in Agile and DevOps. And probably I will first start this time with Arie. Arie, since 20 years ago, Agile Manifesto has been announced with the 17 authors in Salt Lake in the States. And have you imagined how Agile and Patrick DevOps has been impact the business world today back then, let's say 20 years ago and 10 years ago? And that's the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is that how do you see Agile and DevOps has been evolved today? And what would you like to see more on the involvement in the future and the trends of those two practices? And maybe Arie, can you start with you first? Yes.
Yeah, did we imagine the impact when we wrote the manifesto? No. I mean, I can only speak for myself, right? But it has exploded. Son, you know a little bit about 2019 and my travel habits in 2019. I had months when I slept 2 nights in my own bed, and the rest I was either on a plane or somewhere else on the globe. I did never expect that one. On the other side, it's logical, the pace of innovation, the technology has gone up and has taken such an important role, even compared to 2001 when the internet was just this big, right? The impact of technology on our life has increased enormously. So the fact that we are today, we didn't know in 2001, but you could see it coming in 2010. We had 29 when the biggest telco in the Netherlands was almost blown out of the market by WhatsApp. So this is a 12,000 people company blown out of the market by a 50 people company, or maybe even less at the time, right? So you can see that the impact of technology is not only changing business models, it's disrupting business models, making some business models completely obsolete. And you know that the only way is, short cycles, responsive, a capability as an organization, a corporate capability to respond to change. Today it's survival. Right? It's not even a question, do you have to be agile or not? It's if you don't, you die as an organization. And for the future, because I got this morning the question as well, I was in an interview, and I think there are two things going on, because there's almost 20 years of Agile Manifesto, but most organizations still don't have the basics. I'm sorry to say, but they don't have the basics, because the shifts to go into the being able to have this corporate capability and to respond to change in that way that's a lot of bridges to take. And therefore, I think that what is already going on, what we call business agility, which is for me a no-brainer, because you do agile as an organization and nothing else, because it's about corporate value that you deliver. But that will be on the market. How can you do it as a whole? And in this, how do you create the perfect place for your people to learn and to develop in this agile environment to become this agile professional, which is seriously different from all those traditional roles, functions, and promotion activities that we have in there. So I think corporate agility, business agility will go on for a long time, including, adapting the way HR, if you like, adapting the way organizations treat their people.
Yes, thanks. So basically, Arie, to summarize your answer, that you haven't expected when Agile Manifesto has been released 20 years ago, the impact to the world, to the business world. And if you'd like to see more of the future, is that Agile is no longer only meant for software development, but rather for business agility at large scales. We will have more questions touch that point later. Thanks for the feedback. Patrick, same question to you. Like 11 years ago, you created the word of DevOps. And have you imagined DevOps will impact the business world today? And what have you seen the evolved in the last 10 years? And what you like to see more the future development of DevOps?
Yeah, I think it's when I first organized the first DevOps Days event, I was looking for interesting ideas, and I came across some, and for me, that was a way to kind of summarize that. I had no clue that the word DevOps would catch up. It's like somebody wrote a blog post, like, what is this DevOps thing? And it was written after the first event. But I think if I look back on many years, I was, witnessing the birth of Agile or ITIL or any other kind of, practices, kind of new way of thinking at that time, is that it's a zeitgeist. It's something in the air. It's something that like a lot of people are like experiencing and can kind of like work towards to or around a certain problem. So I never say I invented DevOps. I might have, kind of popularized the word, but the fact that I was a big promoter of the ideas, and that's something else, right? It's because I believed in that, and that's something I learned over the last 10 years. You can read the manifesto, and you can do certain practices. When I was thinking in the initial kind of DevOps, I found that a lot of the practices were limited, not by the manifesto or by the thinking, just by the current set of practices. And technology enabled things to be like further in operational side and to move that. So there's definitely an enabler, but it's also a pressure point that built up over the years where, a new idea, the same pressure point was where the developers and the business were clashing. Now the devs and the ops were clashing. So it required new practices because everything was changing around that. I think with every new idea, there is a tendency, it will not work here. We're special. I think we're past that now with Agile. We're now past that with DevOps. Like all the bigger enterprises are, willing and taking the word DevOps. Also, everybody doesn't do what it means. So I follow Arie in a way that like you can say you're doing DevOps, but if that means for you, you're doing containers. It's not DevOps, right? And that's the same thing. If you're doing Scrum, then you're doing Agile. So people sometimes confuse taking on certain practices without the ideas or the spirit or the mindset. And I also found that strangely enough, and I don't want to promote like religion or something, but there's a certain need for a belief. Do you believe that collaborating will give you better results? Do you believe that sharing the burden, that giving people ownership will give you a better result? If you don't believe that, you probably not agree with our worldview. So we kind of have to be conscious for people who don't take that for granted, and they are working in another way. So how this became apparent is that when we moved to Dev and Ops working together, getting in the same room, and then the cloud came, and then we were collaborating with people outside, and everything was abstracted away. So for me personally, that was really strange. Like, is this the end of DevOps? We just use an API and talk to somebody on the other side. But I learned that you still need to have a collaboration across company, not even in your own company. And I think that's, for me, the interesting part is how that is evolving in the services world. How we learned through COVID that remote collaboration doesn't mean that we have to sit in the same building. It's just a matter of a good communication and being aligned with the strategy. I think on hindsight, what I still want to be better at is that the DevOps community actually gets more embedded in the Agile community, and the other way around. I feel they're still a little bit siloed away. Like, oh yeah, you do that part and we do the other part. And even at conferences, I'm not saying they don't come up the subjects, but it still feels that we're a little bit siloed. And especially in DevOps, I feel that Agile is doing a stronger part on business agility and business focus and business organization, where I think in practice, not by in spirit, but in practice, a lot of the DevOps transformations are kind of more on the technology-oriented, kind of pipeline-oriented, where they should elevate themselves to a more business level kind of initiative. And I hope that's where we're going with the future. But I also caution that like 10 years is a lot for an ID, and people have formed their ID by the crowd, what DevOps is. And for a lot of them, it's config management, containers, and pipeline, where I think we could go broader, but that's going to be hard to go against kind of that spirit in the future. But then I take peace with the fact that if this is what everybody thinks, somebody will build on top of that to do something else. So I have like good spirits in a way that like we've paved the road for the next thing to arrive, or the next wave of thinking, or the next bottleneck to be solved, to be worked on that. So that's a little bit how I think about the 10 years of growth of DevOps. So.
Right. Can I add a little bit on it, son?
Sure.
Because Patrick triggered me with the word belief and religion. There's a big thing between doing Agile and being Agile. And for me, DevOps and Agile are so connected, right? It's yin and yang. You can do one without the other. The big problem is that the doing is just doing some Agile rituals in the morning, and we think we're Agile. But let's say the belief, and I call it the paradigm shift, because you shift reality, right? You get a new perception of reality. Is you do decision making in another way, collaboration in another way, communication in another way, documentation in another way. And that is very difficult if you have people that have a job that is relying on the old perceptions. And that's the change we have to go through. And that's maybe the most difficult change you can do, a paradigm shift.
Right. Thanks for adding that, Arie. Patrick, I think I do remember 3 years ago when we did first interview in Beijing, when I asked you, well, at that time, even today, DevOps kind of hot topics, and DevOps days is across the globe. So I remember I asked you, what if one day DevOps no longer the trendy words and left behind? At that time, your answer was that DevOps also incorporated with other many practice you mentioned, like ITIL, Agile, and others. So you will be still very happy to see DevOps pave the way for the next new practice. I think that's still your answer for today, if I remember what you just shared. So
yeah, and it's easy for me because I have like no strings attached. I have like no company relying on making money out of it. I think that's how I've taken peace with like what everybody thinks and what the majority thinks, and that it's a good thing. So.
Right, and you are also very humble and modest person. You always trying to deny the fact that DevOps was created by you, but actually you were saying that it was the right time, right moment, it's the right development, and you are just the person to speak it out. We are really, in the Chinese culture, we really appreciate that kind of characters and also the humble attitude. I was always impressed by your such attitude.